If I was always in the radio, I think you were little.
Yeah.
All right, Father Patrick, you want to keep quiet? He's Italian, he can't help it. Well, we're gonna stop, come on, tie up your hands, and you won't be able to talk. All right, a couple of things. First of all, at the risk of some self-promotion, the bishop mentioned about the program at Ave Maria, which I was just down there, and it's a good program of morning. But as some of you know, 2 years ago, we started the program with Pontifex University, and that's completely online. And a number, actually, 1, 2, 3, at least 4 of you here are involved with the Pontifex program. It's both a master's and a doctorate in Catholic school administration. The doctoral program involves no coursework. It's simply either a project or a traditional dissertation. Several people mentioned in the last session about joy. I should mention this. For a number of years, I used to bring together seminarians that I had taught in different schools, either high school or college or whatever, the week before school would begin. We'd spend a weekend together. And on this one occasion, I was cooking for them and they're out on the porch having drinks. And at one point I hear one of them starts doing imitations of me. And so I yelled out, imitation is the highest form of flattery. So they kept going and I came out and I said, all right, well, all of you guys, we all know ultimately a vocation comes from God, but you're all here because of some connection with me in one way or another. What about me made you consider in a serious way the priesthood? And one guy said, well, you always look very happy as a priest. And I said, oh, okay. I said, including in junior year when I suspended you? He said, you look damn happy that day. So you have in front of you a document that came from the Congregation of Catholic Education in 2022. And when the document came out, I was concerned, first of all, by the title, the identity of the Catholic school for a culture of dialogue. Generally, when we start talking about dialogue, we come into Bishop Daley's territory of compromise. And we all know also about Vatican documents in recent years have been some sources of agita. However, it was a great, pleasant surprise. And in my judgment, probably the best document on Catholic education from the Holy See in probably more than 40 years. And what it really seeks to do is to complement John Paul's Ex Corde Ecclesiae. What John Paul said about colleges and universities, this seeks to do at the elementary and secondary level. And I sincerely hope that it has a better effect than Ex Corde, because at least in the United States, Ex Corde died a morning. I mean, it just never got off the ground anywhere. So if we look at the introduction, paragraph 1, and what we have here, I have the text of the document in regular print and then my inestimable commentary in italics. So paragraph 1. One of the most recurrent and topical issues in the general debate was represented by the need for a clearer awareness and consistency of the Catholic identity of the Church's educational institutions all over the world. At the same time, the Congregation for Catholic Education has been confronted with cases of conflicts and appeals resulting from So you have 2 issues here. One, the need for a consistent statement on what we mean by Catholic identity of an elementary and secondary school. Now, this is not an easy task for a universal church, huh? We have, kind of a big blueprint, but in every kind of culture imaginable, both cultural and political and civil and so forth. But then you get to the real heart of the matter. And this document says, why did this document get written, really? Because the Vatican is tired of getting involved in cases coming from all over the world, right? And the one thing you have to know about, ecclesiastical bureaucracy is they hate conflict. Now, of course, one of the reasons you have conflict is because you don't have a clear statement to begin with. I always have maintained, if you have a clear statement of who you are, what you intend to do, it avoids all kinds of problems up the line. And this is really what it's trying to do. Paragraph 5. This is a combination of a sinus problem and allergies, and so bear with it, I'm sorry. The congregation hopes that this contribution will be welcomed as an opportunity to reflect and deepen our understanding of this important topic. So this is the shot across the bow. Simply put, if we can't get Catholic identity straight, we've lost our way, and we have therefore failed to follow our Lord's command in the Great Commission. Paragraph 6. The first part of the instruction frames the discourse of the presence of the church in the school world in the general context of her evangelizing mission. The first reason our schools exist is to evangelize. And if we're not doing that, there's no reason. So we're not simply providing a good social service. Now, we may provide the good social service, which then becomes a tool of evangelization, but these two have to work together. The second chapter deals with the various actors working in the school world with different roles, assigned and organized according to canonical norms. Notice, according to canonical norms. The final chapter is dedicated to some critical issues that may arise in integrating all the different aspects of school education into the concrete life of the school. Paragraph 7. An intentionally concise and practical tool that can help to clarify certain current issues, and above all, prevent conflicts and divisions in the critical area of education. Only a strong and united action by the church in the field of education in an increasingly fragmented and conflict-ridden world can contribute both to the evangelizing mission entrusted and to the construction of a world in which human persons feel as brothers and sisters and so on. So once again, the clear statement is the basis for everything. Clear expectations. So there's no, deceit involved in the process, all right? A teacher or an administrator is hired knowing clearly what the expectation is. And on the other hand, it's a responsibility to the parents who are committing their children to our institutions that they're going to get the bang for the buck that they're calling for, what they expect. So, simply put, the best defense is a good offense. If you have it all clearly stated at the outset, you won't have problems at the end of the line. The situations that, the bishop mentioned what he inherited. I inherited similar things in institutions. The horror stories go on forever. And you say, how did this kind of thing happen? Well, it happened largely benign neglect at times, and sometimes even malign. And it's so difficult. You could screw something up in 5 minutes, and it takes you 5 years to fix it, right? The other thing you have to make a point of, sometimes you'll hear people say, I wouldn't send my kid to, St. Cunegunda school. My brother went there 30 years ago, and it was horrible. Okay, you have to say, step back, okay? It ain't 30 years ago, right? A lot of the bad stuff that went on is gone, all right? Or the institutions themselves are gone, because people are not going to support a Catholic school that's a bad imitation of the government school that they can get for nothing. So ask them, say, have you visited the school? Do you know really what's going on there? Make sure that what you're talking about, you really know what you're talking about. So chapter 1, paragraph 9. The icon of the Mother Church is not only an expression of tenderness and charity, but also holds the power to be a guide and a teacher. So John the 23rd's famous encyclical, Mater et Magistra. Mater et Magistra, these two go together, all right? A good mother is also a good teacher, all right? And this document is trying to say, let's get rid of the dichotomies here. These things are not mutually exclusive. There's charity and there is truth, and these two go together. They're two sides of the same coin. In paragraph 10, about halfway down, Holy Mother of the Church must be concerned with the whole of man's life, even the secular part of it. I always make the point, let's remember, we're running a Catholic school. The bishop said, remember, we're not running a seminary, we're not running a novitiate, okay? The noun is school, all right? So it's an academic institution, and it's got to be a good academic institution. What we do in it is completely controlled by the philosophy that we have, which is a Catholic philosophy of education. Hence, this sacred synod declares certain fundamental principles of Christian education, especially in schools. That's a quote from the Vatican II document on education. Interesting, by the way, the first council in the history of the church ever to write a document on Catholic education was Vatican II. That can kind of stun people at times. You know, we were in the business for an awfully long time before we wrote a document about it. Some of it was just sort of co-natural. You did it by osmosis, huh? This clarifies that the educational action pursued by the church through schools cannot be reduced to mere philanthropic work. So it's a nice charity case. We do this because, well, they're poor or they're this or whatever. No, we do it because, as St. Paul says, the love of Christ impels us. And the love of Christ, you know, John Paul says in Redemptoris Hominis, that there's nothing better that a person can do than to introduce another person to Jesus Christ. That's the ultimate work of charity. Cardinal Hickey in Washington became famous for his saying, we don't run Catholic schools because they're Catholic, meaning the students, but because we are. With all due respect to His Eminence, that's a cop-out, all right? We run Catholic schools because we want to make them Catholic schools, Catholic children. As a seminarian, I worked in an inner city school in the Diocese of Trenton, city of Trenton. And when I got there, the pastor at the time was a priest who had taught me in high school. And 1/3 of the parish were the longtime wealthy, affluent families that have been there for 100 years. 1/3 Hispanic nominal Catholics, and 1/3 Black Baptists. And we had the first year that I went in the second semester, but that Holy Week, we received 28 kids and their families into the church, all right? That's the evangelization motif that's working. And so when I hear about a school that's 90% not Catholic, that doesn't bother me. The question is, what are we doing to evangelize, to make sure that they're exiting as Catholics, all right? And when I hear from an administrator, no, we really haven't had any Catholic converts, well, there's something wrong then. There's something wrong. The same thing when I hear from a high school principal. When was the last fellow you sent to the seminary? There's a problem. There's a problem, okay? Paragraph 11. So fundamental principles. Education, as the formation of the human person, is a universal right. And of course, that also comes from Maritain, who did the famous Declaration of Human Rights for the UN at its founding. Education is a human right. Paragraph 12. Since education is a right for everyone, the council called for the responsibility of all. The responsibility of parents and their priority right in educational choices rank first. School choice must be made freely and according to conscience. Hence, the duty of civil authorities to make different options available. The state is responsible for supporting families in their right to choose a school and an educational project. Later in the week, we're going to spend a whole session on school choice initiatives, all right? But just as a preface to it, the fundamental issue is parental freedom of choice in education. And as a kind of a headline on it, make sure if you're involved in any school choice initiatives, not a penny goes directly to the school or the church. Parents are primary educators. They get the money. They decide to do with it what they choose. Otherwise, you've got state involvement and you have the mess that you have in Ireland and Canada and so many other places where the Catholic schools, the poor Archbishop of Toronto, Tom Collins, for 10 years, his whole fight for the entire time was trying to recapture the Catholic identity of the schools in the Archdiocese of Toronto, because the church has no control over the institutions. 13. Evangelization and integral human development are intertwined in the church's educational work. Evangelization and integral human development. And that's the one thing, by the way, that we can say in our Catholic schools. The one thing that we do that nobody else can do and do effectively is integral human development. A bishop recently was talking about the Catholic schools in his diocese. And he said, one reason why we have a problem with promoting Catholic schools in my diocese is that we really have some really fine public schools. Are you for real? A bishop could talk about government schools being really fine. Outrageous, right? I'm about to send him a little love note about the whole thing, right? But see, again, that's our problem. Until we have bishops and priests who are willing to say publicly that subjecting your children to the government schools is endangering their salvation, right? We can't expect to have our schools thrive, right? But that a bishop would make a statement that public schools are really quite fine. It means, of course, that he's bought into the secular model, pure and simple. 14. Another fundamental element is the initial and permanent formation of teachers. And the bishop mentioned this, and other people have as well. Our responsibility precisely as priests, particularly with the essential evanishment of women religious in the schools in the past 50 years, the presence of the priest is more important than ever. It's a visible institutional presence of the priest, number one. But number two, the ongoing formation of the teachers. When we had women religious predominant in the schools, they had their own internal formation program. And even in the grammar school that I went to in Newark, which was huge, we had 5 sections of every grade, and we had lay teachers already at that point. But the lay teachers were yoked to sisters who shared their formation with those lay teachers. Now, that formation has to be much more intentional with a predominant and even exclusively lay faculty. And it's incumbent upon us as priests in particular to take a responsibility, perhaps once a month, running a faculty meeting, going through a church document, going through the catechism, whatever. There's a book that my Newman House Press published a number of years ago from Professor Curtis Hancock called Recovering a Catholic Philosophy of Education. And it's an extremely important book. And a number of faculties are using that to go through step by step. What do we mean by a Catholic school? What are the philosophical underpinnings of the institution? 15. The success of the educational path depends primarily on the principle of mutual cooperation, first and foremost, between parents and teachers. I've listened to a lot of former public school teachers who say the first thing that strikes them when they come into the Catholic system is parental involvement. They'll say, when they taught in the government schools, they have a parent night, 2 parents would show up. They come to the Catholic school and there are 30 kids in the class and there are 50 parents that are there. Now, sometimes it's helicopter moms too. They want to make sure that Johnny gets all A's, but that's another story. But the involvement of parents and then John Coleman from University of Chicago did a very important study a number of years ago, where he talks about the fact that the success of Catholic high schools is in direct relationship to the relationship between parent and school. That connection is very, very strong. And part of it is due to the fact that our parents are making tremendous financial sacrifices. And while I'm a big proponent of various school choice initiatives, we have to understand that if the financial burden were removed from parents completely, we perhaps would find a lessening of parental involvement in the product. 16. As far as Catholic schools are concerned, the Conciliar Declaration represents a turning point, since in line with the ecclesiology of Lumen Gentium, it considers the school not so much as an institution, but as a community. Again, growing up as a boy, I kind of like a John the Baptist figure, 1 foot in the old church and 1 foot in the new. I don't think we ever thought of our parish school as an institution. The whole life of the parish revolved around the school and around the parish. I never performed a single significant human function off church property. Whether that was educational or religious or athletic or social, everything revolved around the parish. And we'd have to talk about forming community, right? You have to talk about forming community when you don't have it, right? We had it, and we didn't even know we had it. The characteristic element of the Catholic school, in addition to pursuing cultural goals and the human formation of youth, consists in creating for the school community a special atmosphere animated by the gospel spirit of freedom and charity. In this way, the Catholic school prepares pupils to exercise their freedom responsibly, forming an attitude of openness and solidarity. In one institution that I inherited, and you younger fellows will see this, you get a reputation in the priesthood for being Father Fix-It. So you always get sent to a dump to fix, which I never minded doing. What upset me was when leaving, my successor would come in and mess it up all over again, right? At any rate, this one high school, which had no discipline, no academic standards, no religious environment, but 3 football championships, so therefore it was a good Catholic high school. I got a phone call one day from a woman teaching in one of the local public high schools that she was taking a course at one of the state universities, and she had to visit 3 high schools. And she wanted to come visit my place. And I thought, dear God in heaven, the last thing I want is outsiders to see how bad this is. And I said, listen, I'm a new boy on the block. We can talk later. Come back some other time. She called the second time. And finally, like the gal in the widow in the gospel, I finally said, let her come, let her come. And so, but I did assign her to some of the decent teachers at least. And about halfway through the morning, we met in the corridor at change of classes. And she said, do you know what kind of school you've got here? And I thought, oh Lord, here it is. And I said, what? And she said, these kids, I know. She said, these kids, they like each other and they enjoy being in school and they really like their teachers. I said, yeah. Now, to me, that was a given. But from the outside, she was coming from a different institution where kids didn't like each other. They didn't respect teachers. Teachers didn't care about students. And so it was an insight for me that as bad as the situation was, that at least we were on some terra firma to get things moving beyond that. So the kind of institution that we have. In this way, the Catholic school prepares pupils to exercise their freedom responsibly, forming an attitude of openness and solidarity. And so this whole concept, again, with young people today, and really for the past 50 years, what do we mean by freedom? All right. Freedom to do what I want or freedom to do what I ought. And that's the critical element. And that's part of the training from kindergarten up, all right? And so I mentioned in the homily about, training countercultural agents. That's part of the countercultural nature of gospel living, is the correct understanding of human freedom. 17. In particular, the permanent profile of Catholic identity in a changing world, the responsibility of the witness of lay and consecrated teachers and school leaders, the dialogical approach to a multicultural, multi-religious world. Moreover, for Catholic schools, it is important that students be given also, as they advance in years, a positive and prudent sex education. Now, starting in the 80s, we got ourselves into all kinds of trouble with bizarre forms of sex education in Catholic schools, right? Stuff that was really just being taken in from Planned Parenthood and God knows what. However, that then took the opposite extreme, where you had parents saying there is no place for any kind of education in sexuality in a Catholic school. And I always gave the example that when I was in 7th grade, there was some nonsense starting to go on among the boys in the class, conversation and language and so forth. And the nun wasn't quite aware of what was happening. And so some of the mothers went to the pastor and said, there's some problems and they need to be addressed. And so he sent in the senior curate. And one morning he said, boys, stand up, follow me down to the cafeteria, and he had a big blackboard and he gave us sex education. All right. And it was extremely detailed, but it was in a proper context of moral theology and so forth. And fast forward several months later, my mother said to my father one day, you know, the kid's getting older and maybe you ought to have some kind of a conversation with him and I'm an only. So, you know, there's no benefit of others sharing any information that they had. And so one Saturday, my father said, well, after you serve mass, maybe we should go for a little ride in the country. And I thought, oh, I know what's happening. And so I went to mass and we had a little breakfast and we're taking a ride. He said, well, you know, Peter, you're getting older now. And I thought, yeah. And I was going to let him really sweat because I knew where this was going. You know? And he said, well, you know, and he's bobbing and weaving all over the place. And so finally I said, I couldn't take it anymore. I felt sorry for him. And I said, well, Daddy, is this the conversation about the birds and the bees? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, you know, Father Hammond talked about that last year to us. Oh, good. Well, let's go have ice cream. And so when this business about, you know, never having the conversation versus, all right, but the better programs in human sexuality for schools are parent and teacher combined workshops for them both. What we're saying in the classroom, what you should be doing at home. And the idea that, and some parents say, oh, my children don't know anything about that. Really? All right. Yeah. Maybe you should hear some confessions, okay? Starting in 4th grade. 18. To offer an educational service appropriate to the present times. The witness of Catholic educational institutions shows on their part a great responsiveness to the diversity of sociocultural situations and readiness to adopt new teaching methods while remaining faithful to their own identity. Changing times. Again, sometimes you'll hear some sort of rad trads say, we need the Catholic schools of 1950. If we had the Catholic schools of 1950, we would be doing a massive disservice, okay? The culture of 1950 doesn't exist. And in fact, the culture of 1950 probably never really did exist, all right? But in point of fact, the situation today, we have to educate in the present moment and where kids are coming from. And again, the family situations. You know, very few Catholic homes today are models of the home at Nazareth, okay? And even the ones that ostensibly look that way, you dig a little deeper and you find out there's a lot of nonsense that's going on below the surface. And so there's no ideal moment, period. 19. School as such is designed not only to develop with special care the intellectual faculties, but also to form the ability to judge rightly, to hand on the cultural legacy of previous generations, to foster a sense of values, to prepare for professional life. That's the big picture. You want a mission statement for your school. There it is, okay? The school must be the first social setting after the family in which the individual has a positive experience of social and fraternal relationships as a precondition for becoming a person capable of building a society based on justice and solidarity. And all these people want to talk about, you know, peace and justice and everything. It starts at a very small individual level and then moves out into concentric circles. 20. A Catholic school is endowed with a specific identity. It's reference to a Christian concept of life centered on Jesus Christ. It can be said that in the Catholic school, in addition to the tools common to other schools, reason enters into dialogue with faith. You know, John Paul's fantastic encyclical, Fides et Ratio, right? How the human spirit rises on the two wings of faith and reason. A number of years ago, again, inheriting a bad educational scene. I had an assembly, this high school, we had 80% of our freshman class came to us from government junior highs. And if you want to try to talk about how to integrate a freshman class into a Catholic ethos, where kids have been telling teachers to do God knows what since third grade, and now you're going to tell them, sit down and be quiet and behave yourself and be respectful. At any rate, I had the whole assembly in the gym. And I said, I want to make a point the very first day of school. This school exists for one reason and one reason alone, that everybody here become a saint. And this blood-curdling scream came from the bleachers, and the kid said, I ain't no saint and I don't want to be one. Looked up and I said, well, first of all, you better learn some grammar. I said, but front and center court, right now. That you're not a saint, that's pretty clear, okay? You tell me you don't want to be a saint, we got a real problem, bucko, all right? And so if you don't want to become a saint, then you leave this hall right now, go stand outside my office, and we'll have the papers for transfer at the end of this period. And anyone else who doesn't want to be a saint, he'll lead the procession down to my office. Turned out, and I didn't know it at the time, he was the captain of the football team. We became the best friends, right? He did marvelous work with evangelizing a lot of kids that were in bad shape, but state the goal, right? Be a saint. And what do we mean by being a saint, okay? 21, the bishop made this point repeatedly. Catholic schools are part of the church's mission, right? They're not extraneous to it. When I hear pastors saying, oh, the school is a drain on the parish, I thank God I have low blood pressure because it goes through the roof when I hear that expression, all right? That's, first of all, it's a stupid comment, all right? But would we say the candles, the cost of candles is a drain on the parish, or the cost of flowers, or the cost of vestments, all right? No, this is all integral to the effective running and production of a serious Catholic parish, right? 23, the witness of lay and consecrated educators. I think it's a blessing that we have a large number of lay teachers in our schools. After all, 95% of our kids are going to be lay people for the rest of their lives. And so it's very important to have good lay models. At the same time, I think it's certainly a loss that we do not have, for the most part, in most of our institutions, a significant presence of consecrated religious, right? You know, the bishop had succeeded in getting the sisters from Ann Arbor, but you never benefited even from having them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got them there and then he left. But having sisters part of the project, and priests and brothers, right? That's sort of the fullness of the ecclesiological picture. All of that ought to be there in some form, all right? I would make this suggestion, and I think the Lincoln Diocese does this somewhat. Lincoln has a lot of rural schools that are small, and they don't have enough sisters for all those places, but they have teams of sisters that visit those schools on a regular basis. And so the children are in touch with religious life. And a sister is not something you see in, Going My Way, and never see it in real life. And I think sometimes a little creativity goes a long way too. You may not be able to have a full faculty or even a permanent sister in the school, but there are ways to bring them into the process. We're talking here also about a holistic form of education. One of the disasters of modern education is compartmentalization. You go to a place like Princeton University, and a kid goes to a professor and says, to an English professor and said, I would like some information about Shakespeare's sonnets. Oh, no, I don't deal with Shakespeare. You have to go to Professor so-and-so, that's her field. And so he goes to Professor Jones and says, want to talk about Shakespeare? Oh, no, I don't deal with Shakespeare's sonnets. I only deal with his tragedies. Well, the whole thing is a tragedy, right? These things are, in a Catholic approach to education, these things are all integrated, all right? One thing leads to another, and there's not this compartmentalization that goes on in so many institutions. 24. The work of the lay Catholic educator in schools, particularly in Catholic schools, has an undeniably professional aspect, but it cannot be reduced to professionalism alone. Professionalism is marked by and raised to a supernatural Christian vocation, right? That's the point that needs to be made here, huh? 25. I mentioned about the presence of religious. 26, toward the middle. In order to educate together, a path of common formation is also necessary. An initial and permanent project of formation that is able to grasp the educational challenges of the present time and to provide the most effective tools for dealing with them. This implies that educators must be willing to learn and develop knowledge and be open to the renewal and updating of methodologies, but open also to spiritual and religious formation and sharing. So it's not simply, I've got a good biology teacher. Okay, that's important. But that person also needs to understand that she has a place in the overall religious mission of the school. 27. The history of Catholic schools is characterized by welcoming pupils from different cultural backgrounds and religious affiliations. We have, a number of foreign clergy with us this week. What's the first thing the church has done whenever she goes to evangelize? To open schools, all right? And so, yeah, the first time you open a mission school, guess what? The teacher is the only Catholic, all right? But the evangelization and you're raising the cultural level, the educational level, all of these are working together harmoniously. 28. For the Catholic school, a great responsibility is to bear witness. Today, due to the advanced process of secularization, Catholic schools find themselves in a missionary situation, even in countries with an ancient Christian tradition. That's where we are today, right? We are inhabiting a neo-pagan reality. As I quoted Cardinal Newman this afternoon, that this situation in which the church finds herself today, she's never faced before in her history. We can laugh about the little Greek and Roman gods, right? But there was a transcendental horizon that those people still operated under. That's gone for most people today. 29. Just to piggyback on that, in terms of evangelization, again, the importance of understanding that we're evangelizing more than just the child in front of us. A family told me some while ago, they weren't really practicing the faith. Most of the people that I experience it, I travel constantly. I always say my second home is Newark Airport. And, traveling as a priest, you meet all kinds of, funny people and bizarre people and so forth. At any rate, this one man said to me, I never went to Catholic schools, but our neighbors said, you ought to look at the local Catholic school. It's really good. It's a lot better than the public school. Right? That's not the most noble motive, but it's not a bad motive, all right? I mean, if I were a parent, I want to make sure that the school is a good school, okay? He said, so we put our little girl into the parish school kindergarten, and she came home the first day, and she enjoyed herself a lot. And then she said, so we sat down at the dinner table, and she said, we have to pray. First day of kindergarten. He said, she has changed the culture of our home, right? Just by virtue of what she is learning, she's bringing home. And I should mention, one of the reasons that I have such a strong commitment to Catholic education is because my faith did not come from my parents. It came from the school. My parents had never gone to Catholic school. They were not married in the church. It was what I received in the school that I brought home to them. And that changed the whole culture of everything. So the process I call reverse evangelization. I know Father Davis tells stories about during the pandemic, the families that came into the school at that point, and fixing up marriages and sacramental catch-up ball with the kids and all the rest of it. See, the bishops of the 19th century in this country understood something that we've lost sight of. Get the kids, you get the parents, all right? And so the reverse evangelization. 29. Faced then with the continuous technological transformations and the pervasiveness of the digital culture and so forth, all right? This is here to stay, you know, it's not going to get any better. So we have to know how to deal with the phenomenon, and wishing it away is not going to work. We have to teach young people the proper use of technology. And also part of the process is helping young people come to a good self-understanding of who they are. One of my favorite passages from Pope St. Leo the Great. Christian, recognize your great dignity, all right? We have a dignity, first of all, being made in the image and likeness of God. And then we have an additional dignity, redeemed by Christ and sanctified by the Holy Spirit. If you understood that you had that dignity, would you behave in a particular way or not? In grammar school, the nuns were fond of saying, now, if you don't know whether something's good or bad, ask yourself this question. If Jesus were to walk in the room, would you continue to do it? Right? It's kind of basic, but it's a good criterion, all right? Understand who you are, a child of God, brother, sister of Jesus Christ. Paragraph 30, first line. Catholic schools are ecclesial entities, right? How many times have we heard this already in 30 paragraphs? At the end of that paragraph, the duty to respect one's own identity and that of others, because true dialogue cannot be built on ambiguity or a willingness to sacrifice some good for the sake of pleasing others. You know, and Bishop's statement about compromise, huh? You know, compromise, you never win, right? Because people know that it's weakness reacting, it's not strength. 31, an education which teaches critical thinking and encourages the development of mature moral values. I think I would have preferred, instead of moral values, virtue, but we'll take what we can get here. But critical thinking skills. When Mary Pat Donahue began the transformation of St. Jerome's School in Hyattsville, Maryland, into the classical model, and that was a failed Catholic school. The place was a disaster, right? And she and the young pastor worked together, and now it's become a model for what Catholic education ought to be. But the first year of the school, I went and paid a visit, spent a day, and they start teaching Latin to the kids in first grade. And I walked into, by chance, the first class I walked into was first grade Latin. And I said to the little kid, "Quid agis?" And he said, "Bene." As another kid, "Quid agis?" He said, "Optime." As another kid, "Quid agis?" He said, "Pessime." And some cynic said, "Well, all they're learning is baby Latin." And what a stupid comment. All they're learning is baby English too, okay? But I walked a couple classrooms down into a fourth grade history class. And I said, "Okay, what are we studying?" And the kids yelled out, "World War II. And the teacher very quickly said, "Now, Father, they just started yesterday with it." So I always say teachers and priests are very similar. We hate to be evaluated. Right? And so I said, "All right, well, what do we know about World War II?" And the kids were already able to give the Axis powers and the allies and so forth. Okay. I said, "All right, now, boys and girls, I want you to put on your thinking caps. Tell me why you think World War II began." And this little guy right here said, "Because they didn't end World War I the right way." Fourth grade, what he had learned. Facts are important, critically important, all right? But he had learned to connect the dots, critical thinking skills, right? You go to most universities, they couldn't give the correct answer to that. 32, education as a movement. First of all, it starts with a team movement. And then we get into some of the goofy language here. An ecological movement and an inclusive movement. Okay, we can move on. And a peacemaking movement. All right. You can see how these, church documents are products of committees, all right? You can see different hands in what's there. 33, these movements converge to counter a widespread educational emergency. I think Benedict XVI was the first one that I heard use the expression, we're facing an educational emergency worldwide. Now, it hit in America decades before it hit Western Europe, but it's everywhere. And the standards are lower, and the teacher preparation is bad. For 5 years, I did some adjunct teaching at a small community college in central New Jersey. And it was quite a revelation, I must say. In that area, the public high schools spend about $32,000 per kid, right? And I discovered, now the Catholic high school that I went to that's there spends about 18,000, right? So you got 18 versus 32. So my first day on campus, I'm walking across campus and I hear one kid yell to another, "Hey, what happened?" And he said, "What?" And he said, "Did somebody die? There's a priest there." So immediately that tells you the focus. What could a priest ever be doing in a secular educational institution? But in an educational, I taught philosophy, Latin, and world religions. In a philosophy class, I began by saying, can anyone tell me the difference between a politician and a statesman? It's before we even had legal marijuana in the state, all right? And no idea. I said, all right, well, I'll give you a hint. There's a man who's generally acknowledged to have been a great statesman. I said, I have some serious problems with what he did with Eastern Europe, but Winston Churchill. Now, 32 kids in the class, and anyone want to finish the sentence for me? No one had ever heard of Winston Churchill. Right? In 2015, in that class, I began by saying, this is the 8th centenary of the Magna Carta. Mahu, Magna Carta, King John, Runnymede, English common law, nothing. And one kid yelled out, well, where did you learn this stuff? I said, 4th grade. Right? In world religions, when we got to Christianity, can anyone tell me about who the 4 evangelists were? Kid, it's not sarcasm. Kid said, is that the new rock group? And in Latin, one would think a little higher level there, huh? I always begin by, reviewing English grammar. I happen to be one that believes no American kid will really know English grammar until he studied Latin. And I said, let's review the parts of speech in English. No one had ever heard the word parts of speech. And finally, I was able to get out of them nouns and verbs. This is the educational situation, all right? And I would walk into a college classroom following up another teacher with misspelled words on the board and everything coming from the teacher, all right? So this is the educational situation. It's, for Benedict to say emergency, I mean, it's on life support, okay? 36. This ability to adapt finds its raison d'etre in the culture of care. It is born within the family, the natural and fundamental nucleus of society, in which we learn how to live and relate to others in a spirit of mutual respect. And once again, as I alluded to in the homily, a generation of parents that don't know how to parent, okay? Whenever I do a school visitation or assessment, first thing I recommend to the administration, have mandatory parent workshops. It's essential. Now, it's the same thing we find with the pre-K. Initially they say, oh, who wants to go to that? What are they going to learn? Nobody wants it. After the first session, they say, actually, it was pretty good, right? But all kinds of parenting skills that are critically important that this generation doesn't know. And so we may be doing good stuff in the school, but the parents need to be reinforcing that at home. So it's not like we could have expected 60 years ago, good stuff was done at home that we reinforced in school. It's now, we're doing stuff that needs to be reinforced at home. 37. The educational mission is carried out in a spirit of cooperation between various parties. Students, parents, teachers, non-teaching personnel, school management form the educational community. Everybody, I always make the point, every adult in a Catholic school is a teacher. Whether that's the people in the cafeteria, the maintenance staff, the secretarial staff, everybody in some way is teaching what it means to be a Catholic. So no one is exempt from that. 38, all members of the school community share this Christian vision, makes the school Catholic. Principles of the gospel in this manner become the educational norms, since the school then has them as its internal motivation and final goal. 39, at the end, at the time of enrollment, both the parents and the student must be made aware of the Catholic school's educational project. I've always had the policy, we don't enroll children in our schools. We register families, all right? It is a family project. A number of dioceses have also adopted this covenant program. So when parents come and want to enroll their children in a school, the parents sign a document saying, we understand that this school will be doing this, this, and this. The expectations will be this, this, and that. And we support that, and we promise to continue to support that. And no kid in a Catholic school, well, first of all, to me, it's inconceivable that a child could go to a Catholic school and not go to mass on Sunday. Completely outrageous, all right? Completely. Now, when I was a high school principal, with grammar school kids, they can't drive to church, okay? But in high school, I had a policy, 4 missed masses in a semester, you were expelled. End of discussion. No discussion, right? But in grammar school, and any of you have heard children's confessions, the saddest thing is to hear a little kid say, I missed mass on Sunday. Why? My mommy won't take me, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the kid, right? Now, of course, I have my own little confessional praxis with that. And I said, all right, well, if you said you wanted to go to the mall and your mother said, no, what would you do? I'd ask again. And if she said no, and I'd ask again, I said, and finally, you would what, stop your feet until she said, all right, get in the car, let's go. Yeah, I said, okay, so here's your penance. Next Saturday, starting at 4 o'clock, you keep asking your mother to take you to church. And you scream and shout about it. When she says, why are you doing that? You say, because the priest said it's not my sin, it's yours. But it's an unfair thing to put a child through. It's a disconnect, all right? It's the same problem in the opposite direction. If you have a child from a practicing Catholic family who's attending a government school, and the parents are saying, this is wrong, they go to the public school and they're told it's perfectly right. This is the opposite. So we're telling a kid, this is a serious, important thing to do to be a Catholic. The marker par excellence is to attend Sunday Mass. And yet the parents are not doing it. It's putting the children in a very, very difficult position. 41. Pupils are active participants in the educational process. As they grow older, they increasingly become the protagonists of their own education. In fact, every Catholic school helps pupils achieve an integration of faith and culture. Discipline in a Catholic school ought to be geared to making it eventually self-discipline. We had huge classes when I was in grammar school. My smallest class was 68 kids, and that nun was the principal of 2000, all right? 3rd grade, we had 82 kids in the class. But Sister Vera would sometimes leave the classroom, 82 kids, walk out to go somewhere and come back. But she would say, now, boys and girls, if anyone speaks while I'm out of the room, go up to the board, put your initials on the board for detention. And so a kid would talk and not go up, and the other kid would look at him, he'd go put his initials on the board, and then she'd come back and she'd look at the board and she'd say, oh, I'm so sad. Not about those 5 children, no, no, no. But about the other 5 who spoke and didn't put their initials on the board. You have sat in your guardian angel, all right? And I'm gonna leave the room and give you the opportunity to be honorable boys and girls. And 10 kids would rush and put their initials on the board. Catholic guilt, it works, you know? But no, see, but ultimately what we're trying to do is create an environment of what? Self-discipline. So yes, there are the external forms of the discipline, but at a certain point, they take over. So when she was saying, I'm gonna leave the room, and I want you to be on your honor and do the right thing, she was trying to teach us the gift of self-discipline, right? 44. It's necessary for parents to cooperate closely with teachers, getting involved in decision-making processes concerning the school community and their children, and participating in school meetings or associations. And again, you have to walk a fine line with this, and particularly in areas like suburbia, all right? I never had a problem with discipline in inner city schools. The parents actually wanted more than we were even providing. It was in suburbia that mommy and daddy got involved and said, well, I want discipline, but not for my kid, all right? But to be able to encourage parental involvement without having parental control that is out of whack, all right? And that's a very fine line to walk. Also because a lot of people in suburbia have the mentality of consumerism. I am paying for this product. And because I'm paying for it, this is what I want you to do. We even find that liturgically, huh? How many of you have the problem with funerals, all right? I'm paying you $200. You know, don't tell me what hymns we're gonna have. Don't tell me what readings we're gonna have, all right? I'm paying for this. And so that invades the educational process as well. 45, the service of the teacher is an ecclesiastical munus and office. This is critically important to underscore for civil legal reasons, all right? When we get involved with lawsuits, unfortunately, they happen, all right? We have to be able to say that we have a document in our file that a teacher has signed saying he or she understands the nature of what it means to be a Catholic school teacher. Here are the requirements. Here are the deviations that are possible, all right? Because the minute it comes up for a lawsuit, that's the first thing. Now, the courts thus far have been rather generous to us in this regard. You know, the religious exemption, right? But if you don't have that in writing, you have nothing to go on. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, well, she understood. No, she doesn't understand anything. A legal case is legal. 46. Following the doctrine of the church, it is therefore necessary for the school itself to interpret and establish the necessary criteria for the recruitment of teachers. The relevant authority, therefore, is required to inform prospective recruits of the Catholic identity of the school and its implications, as well as of the responsibility to promote their identity. And in the last sentence, dismissal may also be resorted to, taking account of circumstances. It's not a pleasant thing to have to do, but sometimes it's necessary. 47, quoting the Code of Canon Law, teachers must be outstanding in correct doctrine and integrity of life. Teachers and administrative personnel who belong to other churches, ecclesial communities, or religions, as well as do not profess, have the obligation to recognize and respect the Catholic character of the school. 48, school leaders are more than just managers of an organization. They are true educational leaders when they are the first to take on the responsibility, which is also an ecclesial and pastoral mission rooted in a relationship with the church's pastors. And again, notice how all these things coalesce, huh? The pastor, the bishop, the school administrator, the teacher, the parents. These are all a coherent whole. 49, toward the middle. Indeed, every official act of the school must be in accordance with its Catholic identity, while fully respecting the freedom of each person's conscience. This also applies to the school's curriculum. In the curriculum, the school's cultural and pedagogical identity are made manifest. So we all make curriculum choices, all right? Or selection of library books, for example, right? The left has the happy faculty of saying that, oh, you're a book burner if you don't want to put a book in, right? Well, we all make decisions, that book rather than this book, all right? But when we're forming curriculum, when we're choosing textbooks and so forth, all of these are choices that have to reflect the fundamental mission of the school. I had one situation where a teacher, a biology teacher, brand new, came to me the second week of school and she said, I don't like the biology textbook. Yeah, okay, I don't like chocolate ice cream, so yeah. And she said, but I want to get a new book. I said, well, certainly it's not happening now, okay? So, you work with the book. I said, I've taught long enough to know that, a good teacher can make a bad textbook work, all right? But, if you use the book for a time and, by February, if you still say you don't like it, come to me and we can perhaps have a conversation. Of course, one of the nice things about Catholic schools, we're not hemmed in by all this bureaucracy. You don't have to go through 65 committees to decide about a textbook, all right? So she came to me in February. She said, I don't like the book. Okay. I said, well, why don't you come up with some suggestions? Bring me, 2 or 3 textbooks that you think you might be interested in. And so she did. And I took the books home with me. And my weakest field is science, but in biology, the field I like the most is genetics, all right? And so I opened the textbook, the introductory material, and it said, we're very fortunate to live in a society where religion no longer controls science. I thought, what? Okay. Bing. So I pushed back to the section on genetics. And it identifies Gregor Mendel as the father of genetics, right? The picture of Gregor Mendel is from the chin up, okay? It says, he's from Austria, but nothing more. So I called her in the next day and I said, there's a problem with this book, huh? What's that? And I said, well, look at this introductory paragraph. And she said, well, nobody reads that. And I said, I read it. I said, I imagine that perhaps some kid will bring the book home and they'll be sitting on the coffee table and the father pick it up and say, I'm paying $10,000 a year to have my kid told that religion and science are in conflict with each other. I said, but let's go back to the Gregor Mendel thing. And she said, oh yeah, well, yeah, he's the founder of genetics. I said, yeah, I said, do you know anything else about Gregor Mendel? Huh? I said, he was a priest. He was a monk, which belies the statement at the beginning of that book. Oh, isn't that interesting? I never knew that. So you don't want that, but maybe a different one? I said, no. I said, but you won't be here next year either, okay? But see, the curriculum, I'm saying, textbook, look at what the book says, all right? What's it promoting, right? 51, the school leadership has the right and the duty to intervene, always with appropriate, necessary, adequate measures, when teachers or pupils do not comply with the criteria required by the universal, particular, or proper law of Catholic schools, right? That's the responsibility of a bishop, of a pastor, of an administrator of a school, right? This is not something that's imposing, all right? That's our responsibility. 53, there are also school institutions established and directed jointly by the lay faithful, consecrated persons, and clerics. But that does not eliminate them from the purview of the diocesan bishop. And the Code of Canon Law is clear about oversight of all Catholic schools, the religion that's taught in all Catholic schools, the liturgy that is celebrated there, all right? All of these are diocesan concerns, all right? And they can't simply say, oh, well, we're an exempt institution, whatever that's supposed to mean. 54. It is a service that requires unity and communion with the church. in order to define the school as Catholic at all levels. 56, a Catholic school recognition by ecclesiastical authority is required. So there's no problem with lay people taking the initiative to begin an educational project, all right? Perhaps going to a pastor or the bishop saying, there's no Catholic school in the area, would like to do it. The bishop said, all right, well, give it a shot and we'll take a look and we'll see where it goes off the line, all right? That initiative is fine, but it always has to be, what's the expression? In communion with, an ecclesiology of communion. And then in this way, the faithful are guaranteed that the school of their choice provides a Catholic education. 57, apply for recognition of one of these lay initiatives. And then 59, the diocesan eparchial bishop plays a central role in discerning the Catholic identity of the school. It's interesting that this document talks about the responsibility of a bishop to visit schools. But if he's not able to do at least every 5 years visiting a school, he's to designate a priest to do it. It doesn't say any other delegate, but specifically a priest, which means that's an extension of the role of the bishop, all right? And then dialogue that occurs, and then skip over to chapter 3, talking about the appeals process. In other words, we get back to the original crisis, all right? We're tired of getting these complaints to Rome, so do the right thing at the local level, and you won't have to be appealing to Rome for stuff. Talking about a Catholic spirit, a Catholic inspiration, and 72, another reason for conflicting interpretations is represented by the narrow Catholic school model. In such schools, there's no room for those who are not totally Catholic, right? So you don't have to come from the Holy Family of Nazareth, but at the same time, there are some objective criteria, right? 73, the principle of subsidiarity. So if things were properly done at the local level, they wouldn't have to be in the chancery office. They wouldn't have to be at the apostolic, at the nunciature, or worse yet, even in Rome, all right? So handle things at the local level, and they don't have to get out of control. 74, statutes play an important role in ensuring the necessary clarity. And then they talk about both canonical and state civil situations, all right? 78, self-assessment procedures within the institution, guidelines on desired quality standards, permanent formation. And so really what they're talking about there is preventive medicine, right? Do all of the stuff in advance and you don't have to get involved in problems later. And then finally, very simply, we learn this in the business world, personnel is policy. Personnel is policy, right? So put the right person in place. Monsignor Pilato, when he was superintendent for high schools in LA, expended untold years of forming principals, all right? Who in turn then were involved in formation of faculty and so forth. And our Catholic Education Foundation worked with the schools in LA doing the Catholic identity assessment for them. And they came out in shining stars, really. But that was due to the painstaking effort that he took for 10 years in having the right administrators in the schools, who in turn then picked the correct faculty. So